common issue I've noticed over the years with clients is that so many people want complex solutions to their complex problems. They're waiting for that wake up moment, that eat, pray, love trip that gives them the realizations that they need, the ahas, that one more book that they read that has the missing piece. But the truth is, it's not these big aha moments or these revolutionary moments that change our life. It's the daily small habits and the practices that we develop that ultimately lay the foundation for us to build the structure, build the container of the life that we want, and then we can fill it with whatever our heart's content. But without that discipline, without that practice, it's very hard to get from point A to point B. So many of us actually end up opting to remain stagnant. I mean, how many of us have a little smartphone that we often use on a daily basis? And now, more than ever in our digital era, it is so easy to distract ourselves literally 24/7 if we want to, rather than doing either the boring or the hard things that we could do on a daily basis regarding healthy routines and healthy habits that lays that solid foundation and builds a structure. So today we're going to talk a little bit about this, and I got some cool tips and tricks for you coming up. So later in this video, I'm going to be reading The Virtue of Simplicity from my book, Heart of Humanity. But first, I want to give a little rant. I'm going to touch on a few topics that brings it all home with the chapter I'll read. A perfect example of addressing boredom and return to simplicity is writing a book, which obviously as an author I have experience in, but I meet so many people who tell me that they want to write a book one day and they find it so awesome and so incredible. And I do believe that everyone has a book in their heart to write. But the truth is, not a lot of folks are able to confront the absolute fucking boredom of what it takes to write a book. You know, we all, I would say, I'm generalizing, but we all have this vision in our mind of like a crisp morning with the sun rays coming through the window as we have our warm cup of coffee, and we're just inspired and we have the voice and the inspiration in us, and the words flow out of our pen onto the paper and a book is made. No, that might happen like 5 to 10% of the time, maybe even less. The truth is, the vast majority of the time of writing a book, it's absolutely, I don't want to say it, but it can be mind-numbingly difficult, and just you're hitting writer's block. You're hitting that drought of inspiration, and it's not necessarily fun. Yeah, we get those awesome moments, and when you finish, it's incredible. But the truth is, it takes simple daily practice and showing up, just showing up in a simple way, putting pen to paper, no matter your mood, no matter how you feel, no matter the day ahead or the day you had yesterday, and just getting the job done, doing your work and doing it well. And even if you don't feel like you're doing it well, still doing it anyway. So much of success in life is mere consistency. And I think now more than ever, it is so easy to distract ourselves away from doing hard things or doing uncomfortable things, especially things that we don't need to do. The book is a perfect example because it's creating habits that have no payoff till months, if not years later. Just as going to the gym the first month or two, it's really hard to see any of that payoff because the muscle growth or the losing of weight takes time. And so it's really frustrating, at least for me, to do projects right here, right now, where you're not getting that instant gratification or that reward right away. And you're just building that foundation, you're building that structure, and it isn't till months or years later where you see the results. Fuck, that sucks. But that's where the juice is. That's where the truth lies. And that is how we get from point A to point B in our life. Okay, so a practice that I made that I absolutely love to apply to everything in my life, from relationships to difficult situations to even just doing everyday chores, I call the 2% milk rule. When you spill a glass of milk, wouldn't it make sense to clean it up right then and there when it's only 2% of a problem? The truth is, a lot of times when we make little messes in our life, yeah, they might be just 2% right there, but then we make a little mess over here, that's also 2%. Then we make a little mess over here, that's also 2%. And slowly but surely, all these messes, percentages add up until they become extremely overwhelming. Who has ever done that with dishes in the sink? To where just taking the time to wash something by hand might just be a minute of your time after you use it. But for someone like me that doesn't have a dishwasher, if you allow things to pile up all of a sudden, that might take 30 minutes of your time in the future. And it just becomes increasingly gross and not fun to address or do. There's so many things in our lives that we handle this way, be it the way we caretake of our homes or the procrastination of homework, waiting till deadlines, and then we get overwhelmed, rather than if we had been working on it just 2% per day, and then by the time it's actually due, we were probably long done and already moving on to a next assignment to be ready for. But how this teaching or this practice actually started was when I first got married. And when I was courting my ex-husband, I remember telling him that I love to address issues when they're only 2% of a problem. And a lot of people might feel that that could be an issue to where you're nitpicking things. But the truth is, it's really just more on how we communicate issues that we see rather than actually addressing them. So really hear this in your mind. This is a crucial, crucial, crucial thing to take away from this. It is not that we're talking about the problem that is the issue. It is how we are going about it. So often we are repeatedly picking at a scab, picking at a scab, picking at a scab, and being frustrated in our communication around it, and maybe not finding solutions because we're not effectively communicating, or maybe not in therapy. But if we see a problem early on in a relationship that might just be 2%, and you have two partners that are emotionally open to communicating, or maybe they're in therapy together, P.S., high recommendation, even when there's no problems, get your butts in therapy at the beginning of the relationship. But because you're gonna create a beautiful reservoir of wellness and practices on how to handle difficult situations in the future. But more on that later. So this 2% rule of the moment something manifests and you see that it probably is going to turn into something, a bigger deal later in the future, it's wonderful to simply address it right then and there, rather than sweeping it under the rug every single time it surfaces until it turns into like an 80% thing that you can no longer avoid. That is how a lot of people approach difficulty or uncomfortable conversations, because they don't like having them. But the truth is, all of these complex explosions that happen in the future all started as 2% problems that we could have addressed and cleaned up right then and there. It's like the little dust bunnies that start with just a little single couple hairs coming together. I have a husky that sheds a lot, so I have to be on top of those dust bunnies. But it's so interesting how they just slowly accumulate more and more and more fur and dust and debris until you take care of it. But if you actually vacuumed or cleaned up or dusted just a little bit every day or every few days, you're good to go. The same applies to our emotional bullshit that we deal with on a regular basis. Love it, love it, love it, love it. Let's go ahead and move on to the reading segment of this video. Virtue 7, The Flower of Simplicity, page 109. In Tunisia, chores are seen as a gateway to enlightenment, or rather, a gateway to the presence of inner peace. When our hearts or minds become tethered or bound up in the complexities of life, the virtue of simplicity helps us return to the basics, the fundamentals of peace and well-being in any given moment. Chores may have a negative connotation for some people, but in Tunisia, we learn to take the subjective unpleasantness out of the necessary tasks. The opportunity then becomes about giving our full presence to the task at hand, which functions as a focusing element in our peace practice. Let me repeat that, which functions as a focusing element in our peace practice. So what I love about chores is that they're wonderful opportunities to practice mindfulness. Even if it's doing laundry, washing the dishes, vacuuming, it doesn't matter what the chore is. we're simply able to show up, be in the present moment, and give our full attention to the task at hand, eliminating, or rather removing, any emotional projection that we have onto it. So often, our procrastination and the issues that we face with doing, quote, boring or difficult things is all mental and emotional baggage. It really has nothing to do with the task at hand, but rather our thoughts and opinions around it. That's why in that section I talked about the subjective unpleasantness. I can't tell you how many times I've had assignments in my social work program to where it's just like, it seems so daunting. It's like climbing Everest. But the moment I actually get into it, I get into a flow state and it works out just fine. And so now that I've been in the program, I'm about halfway done. It's so beautiful that I no longer have that initial gasp energy whenever I look at hard situations or hard papers I'm gonna have to write. I just drop all opinion. And that is a really, really beautiful practice, especially in Zen, the dropping of body and mind, the dropping away of our perceived perceptions around it, and just allowing it to exist without our human analyzing and human needing to categorize it as right or wrong or bad or good or unpleasant or pleasant, and just approaching it from a state of neutrality. It is so delicious. And if we can approach our chores and the different habit energies we're trying to create for our well-being and our success in the future, boy howdy, do things get so much more delicious and even easier in our life to come, especially going back to the 2% rule. So this whole chapter on simplicity is remembering or being reminded of that simplicity at its heart is the building block of the healthy habits that we can develop success for in the future. One of the introductory teachings and practices of this virtue and its corresponding tenet, release the mundane, is how to allow space for boredom and even discomfort. We abstain from substances or activities that raise our dopamine and distract us, and thus lucidity and self-awareness begin to return. However, whenever boredom arises, many of us have the habit of immediately engaging in digital entertainment, social media, or cyber conversing with friends, since communication is now only a click away. None of this is bad or wrong, but it creates a society in which there's literally no downtime from external stimulation. Ooh, that's powerful. Really think about that for a moment, to where we really do live in a society now where we can eliminate any moments of like what we might have called peace in the past, but any moments of self-reflection, any moments of quiet that can allow for self-reflection. It's quite fascinating. So that's a big teaching I share with all my students is do not always reach for distraction. Sure, it can be convenient at times, but on average, it's much better to just allow yourself to sit in the temporary boredom or sit in the temporary discomfort and allow your mind to kind of work itself out. And I tell you what, a lot of times if you are bored, that's sometimes when creativity comes through. Years ago, I did a 30-day, it was in November, I did a 30-day challenge of no social media, no video games, just nothing that I would normally reach for to distract myself away from things. I might have even done away with TV, I'm not sure. But what's cool is at that time, what I ended up replacing all those activities with was I started learning Japanese on Duolingo. I started actually writing letters to people, physical letters to people, since I didn't have social media. And the biggest thing was I began to journal, and I would go through all the books I was reading and jot down my favorite quotes and reflections from it. And I just really got involved with my own peace practice again, which I kind of had put on the back burner at the time. And so it was so interesting to see that my memory of my activities during that month are so much more vivid in my mind than any other month that year that happened, because I was present and I could actually now have a memory of recall of what happened. Not everything, but if you ask me what happened that December or what happened that October, I can't tell you. So it's so cool that when we slow down, it actually increases our memory and our retention. So yes, don't always reach for distractions. Let's take a breath. Boredom can be a gateway to simplicity. Without distractions, it's easier to focus and take our mindful time. Chores, quality sleep, cooking healthier meals, and exercising are often things put on the back burner where they are left to sit and pile up when we're too busy or distracted to get to them. Returning to the everyday basics of human life helps us refill our reservoir of peace and wellness in times of drought. Let's take a breath. I love that. So that kind of sums up everything that I was talking about in this video, to where, it's not about having a complex solution to a complex problem. It really is just returning to the basics, returning to the fundamentals if we want to create positive change in our lives. So the main two takeaways is obviously return to the basics, but also don't let things pile up. When you're starting to get overwhelmed with things, remove the emotional and the mental baggage from it and just look at it neutrally. And so we have that reservoir of peace. Make sure that you're dealing with things 2% at a time each day, rather than sweeping them under the rug and waiting for them to become problems in the future. So I want to thank you all if you made it this far, and if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, or even share it along. I really have been having a lot of fun and having a lot of joy in making these videos, and I have been appreciating all the positive comments I've been getting. So yeah, I'll see you in the next one, y'all. Mwah.